Good evening and welcome everyone to our February 11th, 2025. I'm John Zipperer, your host for Week to Week. I'm also the club's Vice President of Media and Editorial. In my spare time, I help Elon Musk break into the Social Security system. I got applause for that. I'm not really doing it. That was a joke. Tonight is the 13th anniversary of Week to Week. We started this 13 years ago. We're still going along, and I want to thank all of you who've been here, all of you who've been on stage, everyone watching and listening online. I actually had expected to congratulate you for, braving the atmospheric river, and I guess we've dodged it for a day or two. So, congratulations for almost braving the atmospheric river. With that said, let us meet our panelists for today. I'm going to start at the far end of the stage with Josh Kane. He's the senior political reporter for the San Francisco Standard. Welcome back, Josh.
Thank you.
Next to him is political correspondent for KQED News, Marisa Lagos. Hello, Marisa. And to my immediate left is Melissa Kane. She's an attorney and political journalist. Thank you. We have some cards spread throughout the room if you have questions, especially if it's during the first half, so we have a chance to work them in. Write them down. Our wonderful volunteers will bring me some questions, and I'll try to work them into our conversation today. Now, on to our roundtable. Let's start tonight with some of the news that has obviously dominated the headlines since Donald Trump reassumed the presidency last month. And first, let's discuss Elon Musk. Elon Musk... I believe he's an entrepreneur in automotives.
I've heard of him, yeah.
Yes. Go start with you, Marisa, excuse me, since you're so smart aleck tonight.
Sorry. I'm just really getting into the vibe here.
Well, we were kind of talking in back how Democrats have kind of been unclear how to respond to what's been happening. What do you make of what Elon Musk has been doing? Because he's been apparently given pretty much a
free rein.
Yeah, taken off the leash and let run.
Well, yeah, I don't know if anyone caught it today, but there was a lengthy Q&A in the Oval Office where Elon was standing there with, I think, his youngest of his 12 children, I believe he has, with him just messing around, and then Trump sitting there at the Resolute desk as Elon answered a bunch of questions. And to me, it's sort of illustrated in very stark terms the tension here, which is they just both have huge egos and like being the center of attention. So I do wonder how long this can go on. But yeah, I think in Elon, Democrats have found at least something to kind of hold on to in terms of a way to push back. I think even in some of these red states, there's some concern over the amount of power he's been given, the information that he and his team of engineers have access to. And it's very unclear to me, what he's actually been able to do so far. The mandate of waste, fraud, and abuse is very popular, but when you get down to you have the Social Security numbers of everybody who has a student loan in America, I think there's some concern. So there's clearly not a schism yet, but I still think that this can't last forever, personally.
Okay, Josh.
Yeah, when you look at Elon Musk, he's obviously been emboldened to just run roughshod and go through any department he wants. I do think that the relationship is tenuous because both of the two men have such large egos. But I would also say that they work well together in the sense that Elon gets to do whatever he wants and rifle through all the paperwork and, recommend massive cuts. And Trump gets to just focus on the celebrity of being president. Mm-hmm. And that allows him to do what he does best, which is riff in front of cameras and, make social media statements that some could say are stress tests and others are just, saying whatever he wants and just, having that adulation. And with the kind of attention economy, so to speak, that they say of how having the most publicity is really a commodity that's as equal to money in politics now, if not greater. And if you have both, which Elon, the richest person in the world, and then Trump, the largest megaphone right beside him, I think actually they probably will continue to work together quite well. Now, whether that actually leads
Like
to
until
a
they don't. You know what I mean? It's
well,
like,
the thing is, we have to really, question how much of this is real and how much of this is just getting headlines. At a certain point, probably they will peter out with all these announcements. They've had time to really build up this platform of what they want to roll out. Whether or not that actually is sustainable in 6 months from now, a year from now, I'm a little bit more dubious on that. But I would say that I think when it comes to Trump and Elon, they have been able to just dominate all of the headlines, all of the news cycle. And I think talking to Democrats, local, state, national, there isn't a cohesive game plan. And that's actually one of the things that I've been pretty surprised by, is just how no one seems to have a real cohesive message from the Democratic side of politics. And I was having a conversation with someone today. When you look at who is the face of the Democratic Party at this point, you can't really actually say who it is. And I think actually the person who probably was most equipped to combat Trump and Elon right now is Gavin Newsom. And he has been completely politically neutered by the fires in LA, because he is relying on federal aid to help address that crisis. So actually, the biggest champion from the Democratic side right now is completely silent, because he is beholden to that federal relief funds. So I think the person who's smarting the most day after day right now in the first month of Trump is actually Gavin Newsom, because he's been preparing for years for this moment to fight Republicans on every front. Take them on every issue. And instead, you have Democrats who are actually saying, you know what, we're not going to fight on every front. We're going to sit back and pick our spots. But what that does is it actually, if you don't fight now, when the fight comes to your doorstep, it might be too late. And I think that's where Democrats are having a real crisis in communication.
Melissa?
If Gavin Newsom's our hope, we are in very deep trouble. That is a very depressing thing to think about. All right, so here's the thing. Like Marisa said, the issue is partly we don't really know what's happening, right? If you read the article and it's Elon Musk gets into all your stuff, and then you read down, you go, where did this come from? And it's because the guy knows a guy who said that the coders were getting, and you're just I don't even know what that means. So the direct evidence of exactly what is happening is not totally clear. But I don't think that they are deluded into thinking they're really friends, right? I think they both understand this is a very transactional situation, right? They each have something the other needs and wants, until it doesn't work, they'll just keep doing what they're doing. And Machiavelli wrote, and I'm paraphrasing, if you want to do something, you need to have a henchman, right? So that if it goes south, you can cut off the henchman, right? And so right now, Elon Musk is the henchman. He's enjoying that. He might not be so happy when Donald Trump has to cut him because he's done something that he needs to distance himself from. But it's not unheard of. It's a very well-worn, sort of path for political leaders to have that second who can be the boogeyman, right? Everyone, we did not elect Elon Musk. Every sign that says we did not elect Elon Musk, Trump is just laughing because he's like, great, yell at him, because I can fire him and then I'm fine, So I think that it's a very common tactic, and that's what we're seeing. And I think that they're both having fun with it kind of while they can. But again, in terms of what Elon Musk is actually doing, it's still, he tweets some things and we think he's done some things, but I'm still not totally sure what all of that is. And I feel like maybe by the time we find out, it will be too late. By the time,
Sure,
how do you find out he has your social security number? Well, it's not a good thing. So, but I do think people are still really confused.
Yeah, there's been some sound and fury about the fact that he's basically staffed his effort with early 20-somethings, folks right out of, I guess some of that he recruited from online chats. So, extensive security background checks are not in place. These are the people who have been kind of doing the computer work or whatever to get into government systems. It's kind of less like the West Wing and more like Ocean's 11, kind of getting in there and seeing what they can do. Okay, well then let's talk about the court's pushback, or the legal pushback that's attempting to kind of decide this in the court. There have been cases, and judges have ruled, you, Elon Musk, cannot, you have to destroy the information that you've gotten from these records or whatever.
Definitely happening.
And and to the Trump administration, you can't freeze the funding you've frozen. And the Trump administration, I guess the spokesperson, I think it was today, said, we're going to follow the judge's rulings to a T. What do you think? Is this so? The big thing here that we're going to get to is, of course, the whole issue of constitutional crisis. What happens when the White House says, no, how are you, Justice Roberts and your pals going to enforce, whatever, your injunction against us on X, Y, or Z? So what do you think as a lawyer?
Yeah,
of
the
these
lawyer
ca-
on stage. What happens?
Oh, Jesus. Well,
Well, what do you think about the cases that have been filed? Do they have substance, or are they kind of floating, kind of like you said, we're not quite sure what's going on, so does that mean the legal cases are a little amorphous?
So I did a check of the federal case database, and I saw that since January 20th, since the swearing in, 65 cases have been filed. It's like 2 a day, where Donald Trump is a party. Now that's mostly him as a defendant, but sometimes as a plaintiff as well. So, there's a lot. And so a lot of it is temporary restraining orders, right? These injunctions where the court's saying, you have to stop what you're doing. We need to hold everything in place until we figure out what is going on. So the first thing you should know is these are not final rulings. These are just, temporary. It's in the name. And so, when you hear, they got the temporary injunction, it's actually fairly easy later to get undone. So it's not a huge win necessarily. I don't want to say they're easy to get, but they're easier to get than I think a lot of people think. You regard this as a win, but it's like, okay, for a few weeks. So I was reading some of the filings in these cases. And I will tell you this, as much as it seems like there are because we're just getting the flood of information, and it seems there's just like monkeys with crayons, writing things. I don't know where this is coming from. The administration's defense in these cases is good. And I'm not saying they're going to win, but I'm saying it's far more sophisticated than I think a lot of people hope or think. There are good defenses. There are defenses based on executive exercise of power that Democrats have done. If you think of FDR, if you think of even Kennedy, there are lots of ways in which presidents on the left have exercised executive power that have kind of widened the scope, and they're trying to sort of drive down that road now to really mangle metaphors. But I want to make sure everyone understands this is not BS. The administration has had 4 years. Well, not Donald Trump, but there are a lot of Republican nerds who have had 4 years to sit and plot and plan, and they know exactly what they're doing. And I'm not saying they have a coherent plan, but I'm saying they know how to defend.
Could it be called Project 2025? Maybe.
That has an interesting ring.
Write it down, maybe.
But I just mean yeah, exactly. Yeah. So the Democrats have some early wins because they can come in and say, we don't even know what's going on, and just everything, the status quo, we want you to keep the status quo. And the courts say, okay, fine, and let's just figure out what's happening. And then the administration comes in and they're making some, again, not crazy arguments. Whether or not you agree, they're sophisticated arguments. They are ready for these. They know that these legal challenges are coming, and they're ready for them. And it's not clear what's going to happen in terms of the decisions, and then will they go up to the Supreme Court, in which case, I think that the Trump administration feels pretty confident. That even though they do lose sometimes, but feels pretty confident at that point. So I just want to temper everyone's sort of expectations, both in terms of winning and the potential for the court actually siding with the administration. The executive order, while there's tweeting on, we're going to stop all the, no more puppies, and you go, wait, what? But then you go read it, and the actual executive order, which you can find at whitehouse.gov, is far more sophisticated than the tweet sounds. They're being very careful in the way that they're writing these things, and they're making them as defensible as they can. So
Some of them.
Yeah.
The birthright one was the judge. They're come on.
Well, remember, some of these, look, there's the old, and your political nerds know this story, but, there's the old story that's attributed to LBJ, right? the candidate goes to his campaign manager and says, I want you to spread a rumor that my opponent has sex with pigs. And the campaign manager says, I'm not going to do that. That's not true. And the candidate says, I know, but I just want to see the son of a bitch deny it, right? Some of these cases, the point is, or like some of these executive orders, the point is to make you defend this, make you defend, birth tourism, or, and I'm paraphrasing, this is like the publicity, make you defend, criminals who are here illegally, make you defend spending money frivolously in other places.
Right, it sounds
like it makes you, like, the whole point is to make them defend it, not to necessarily
Win the case.
So a lot of these are kind of bait.
Well, and we were talking about this in the back before we came out. The Democrats kind of, have they been insufficiently vocal? Have they been, too cautious or whatever? But it might make sense that they're not chomping at the bit right away because A, they would fall more into that trap, and B, there's a lot of this. If you look at the polling, Donald Trump is now, for the first time ever, he's above 50%.
Give it time.
I don't think it's.
I'm not saying it's upward only. I'm
Any
just saying.
fear about like losing the PR battle. Really, I think Democrats just still haven't figured out how to like circle the wagons after the election loss for the presidency. But the other thing is, like, I was talking with Nancy Pelosi's office for a story I wrote earlier this week, and they have three kind of like fronts that they're going to be fighting the Trump administration on. And I think this goes for most Democrats. And it's litigation, legislation, and communication. And communication is everything from social media to like mass protests. We haven't seen that really yet. Legislation, they can propose any bills they want, but those aren't going anywhere. So really the only thing Democrats have at this point is litigation. And so I think the birthright citizenship, I think Democrats will probably win that. I'm not a lawyer. I have watched a lot of TV. And but I will say that Democrats are in a tough spot because they don't have real, true, mobilized leadership yet. We saw the Schumer press conference, which was kind of a mess. And to put it lightly.
Stop saying aroused. Just stop.
I haven't said it, but but yes, I think when it comes to just like how they're going to fight this fight, the only option they have in the immediacy is through the courts. And
on the legislative front, it's also, I think, in the sense of like stopping the agenda, because I think we can't understate or overstate how tiny of a margin he really does have. Like, there's a reason that this is all coming out in executive orders in the shock and awe campaign and not through legislation, right? The only thing they've done so far is the Lake and Riley Act, which we could talk about, and I think is politically and policy-wise raises a lot of like fascinating questions. But Trump knows that like he has a Republican majority in Congress that doesn't want to raise the debt ceiling, that is very much like sort of in fights amongst themselves around a lot of these things. And that's why I think the Elon stuff is potentially an opening for Democrats, is like when you cut off NIH funding, that affects red states as well as blue states. When you potentially mess with Social Security or any of, the VA, how many thousands of people, millions of people depend on the VA. Like, there are so many things that once it's actually impacting people's real lives, I think it does give them more of the communication sort of strength. And I know, guys, we're all exhausted, but it's February 11th. Like, it's been 3 weeks. So, like, the midterms are not for 2 more years. I do think, obviously, a lot of people on the left would prefer that there was a better strategy right now, but I also think you can't really, fully go on defense or offense in some ways until you understand what the other side is doing.
To carry on that point, though, and why I personally don't think Trump and Elon are going to have a break in the next 2 years is because we saw with the America PAC that Elon Musk put together for this last election, more than $200 million of his own money. He's talking about keeping those operations going through the midterms to go after different states across the country, particularly, states that will determine who has the majority in the House and the Senate. We saw the way that Crypto PAC, Fairshake, was able to raise more than $200 million, mostly from big tech individuals here in the Bay Area. And those, $1 million contributions in, smaller states, they can have a massive impact. And I know Democrats, it's not like they can't raise money, but I do think that Elon's America PAC, the crypto PACs, and as we've seen, a real clear shift to the right within the upper echelons of tech, I think that money's going to have a huge impact. And I see there being kind of an allegiance or ties that can last at least through those first 2 years so that they could secure a broader majority.
That might be true. There's also like just an open question as to like, what are all these folks in tech getting from this? And it's not a lot. If you look at what the head of the FCC is trying to do in terms of going after these companies, which like arguably goes well beyond his actual, legal authority there, but there's not a lot of love lost on the right for big tech. And so to your point, I don't know how this will play out, if they will stick with him, but like if, you all kiss the ring and then you continue to have your business kind of undermined, like, does that, are you going to keep writing those checks? I don't know. I mean, the crypto guys are a whole other level because I don't think they have the same, like, they care about one very tiny thing, which is crypto regulation. And it does seem like,
I think crypto wrote a playbook that we're seeing now go through the AI industry. They were basically saying, yes, we want regulation. Let's work with you. And then they continue to move the goalposts until they get what they truly want, which is really, regulation maybe in the crypto space, but AI, probably nothing.
Yeah.
And so, I think if we see these tech companies get the massive profits that they really are desiring, the kind of let us cook environment, just hands off, over the next 4 years,
like my 11th
I just don't see them coming back to Democrats. I don't think there's actually something Democrats will
An
be able to
offer.
present. Yeah, there's no counter if you've just made all this money by, kissing the ring, throwing $1 million in an inauguration party. I think actually we are seeing a really clear movement in the tech sphere. And I
Where
think
will the Democrats get their money from then? Sorry,
Go for it.
Yeah, I'm asking a question. Where would the Democrats get their money though, right? It's been this, it was unions and then it was some tech companies. It was a big part of their
Yeah, I mean,
fundraising.
it's a great question. I think it is something that, you're still going to have very powerful, influential people who are to the left or identify as Democrats. I think, what's funny is George Soros has been the big bad boogeyman for years. What is Elon Musk by comparison? He actually is literally pulling the strings. So I think, when we talk about comparing the way that Democrats fight and the way Republicans fight, what speaks to their base, Democrats are always going to be at a deficit because they have to address dozens of things, and Republicans generally fall back to about 5 or 6 things. And even if you make their lives more difficult economically, they still can fall back on the 3 Gs, which is God, guns, and gay people.
Is that still really a thing?
Well, now it's trans
now it's
people.
trans, yeah.
Yeah, and so it's moved over. But I think when you look at what Republicans have to message, it's much more simplified, and it's usually stoked by anger and fear more than maybe Democrats can accomplish.
But if the eggs aren't on the shelves, we'll see.
Yeah.
I'm only half kidding though. These are things that actually voters care about, not whatever Elon is on. So I do think that there's going to be some.
Well, okay, so Trader Joe's has limited you to purchasing 1 container of eggs per day.
We're down to 1.
Yeah. How many eggs do you go through in a day?
I have 2 boys.
Okay, so shop at Trader Joe's, drive down the street to say, okay. So one of the targets that has come up pretty quick early in this effort to defund part of the government and even do away with departments is also something that's been a long time target of Republicans, and that is the Department of Education. And in looking into this, because I find this interesting that they might actually get there, I'm the old person on this panel. Some of you probably remember HUE, the Department of Health, Education, and Welfare, and the name Joseph Califano, who was Jimmy Carter's secretary of HUE. And Joseph Califano opposed Jimmy Carter's commitment to create a separate Department of Education, which he did in 1979, because Califano said the federal government's relatively minor education funding was better protected as part of a larger agency, such as HUE. Carter fired Califano in 1979, but could education as a department be one of the actual early successes of the Trump administration, success for their agenda?
What do they do?
I think they handle a lot of disbursements of. I'm going to
They do,
pretend.
yeah,
I know.
I mean, a lot of what they do is enforce sort of regulations, but also handing out a lot of the money that goes to lower performing districts, places that need more help. I mean, which is actually sort of, I think, one of the interesting questions here is like a lot of what has protected sort of these types of government initiatives in the past, whether it be something like that, whether it be NPR and PBS funding, is that guess who relies on it most? Rural red states, smaller places that do not have the same sort of property tax and other revenue sources as big places like California. Could they? Sure. I mean, I think this is one where like we'll have to see if Congress would go along with it. But I think that, a lot of what these agencies and departments do like sounds really good to cut until you actually look at, as a member of Congress, like what your constituents benefit from it, and then it gets a little more complicated.
Well, I think the question isn't necessarily should we give money for educating poor people? It is, do we need a Department of Education to do that? Right? Is there a way to do it that doesn't require?
If the Treasury shut down, how are we going to even send out that money?
But that's true. Right, but so we do need that department, I'm pretty sure. But do we need this big sprawling thing to? And maybe so. I don't know. But the fact that I don't know, and then I bet a lot of folks in this room don't know exactly why there's a whole DOE versus just like some grant arm of some other agency or through the appropriations program is why somebody needs to be stepping up and defending this department, because just saying,
Right.
oh, no education, it's like, well, yeah, of course we're pro-education, but why this? Is this being run properly?
Which is why I brought up the Hugh connection, because it's like, it's within living memory that we did not have a separate
Right.
education department. We got one, and all we've heard about public education in the United States for the last 45 years
How terrible.
is how terrible it is, and it's getting worse.
It
That's
is
also
not
gets to, like,
fixed.
where I think we're going to have to be watching, like, if you eliminate the DOE in name, but you're still having some other government agency doing the exact same functions, like, then that is literally just a messaging strategy. It has nothing to do with the substance, right? And that is where I think
That's
you know,
politics.
Exactly.
Okay.
Yeah, I think that's where Republicans will be most effective, is just on the messaging. And
Yeah.
it's like, whether or not they actually followed through and did that, it's like they say they did that. And before you have time to really pay attention to it, it's on to the next 5 other things with the so-called flood the zone, or the muzzle velocity, I think is the term that Steve Bannon used.
Yes.
We're inundated with messaging and information, half of it real, maybe a worse ratio.
Yeah.
And so, like, unfortunately, journalists like Marisa and myself, like, we have to pick which story we want to talk about. And before, we lose your attention span, we've got 5 other things that have been coming out.
And in this moment, we have to make it, I think, more buttoned up than ever, because we're getting attacked as well, like, while this is all happening. And I think you could argue that, like, the new FCC head and people like that are not necessarily playing by the rules, but they expect us to. So it's like incumbent on us to be even more careful in our reporting, which takes more time. And unlike Elon, like, I do like to sleep.
Well, speaking of flooding the zone, what do you think about Greenland, the Panama Canal, and Gaza?
Oh, easy stuff.
I mean, these are, as Donald Trump says, these are real estate opportunities, folks. Is that, I mean, each of those, when they first were uttered and put out there, I thought, no.
I mean, he says the quiet part out loud.
Yeah.
It is a real estate opportunity to him. Like,
Yeah, okay, so like, if I can, I'll just try and go one by one real quick. So the whole strategic defense aspect of Greenland, okay, whatever. Like the Gulf of America, that is, I think actually we probably have kind of already seen what part of that was about. It's not only just stupid and foolish and falls into the Doge kind of branding of Elon Musk and Trump being able to put out a tweet or Truth Social post. But also he banned the Associated Press from a briefing today because they would not call it the Gulf of America. And by that pushback, then what are we seeing? We're seeing a
Chilling effect.
a
Yeah.
chilling effect and essentially freezing out a free press. So, I mean, that is just like one real obvious example of like why you do something like that, to see if it's a way to kind of, block out the messengers and then start bringing in like complete unprofessionals in the White House briefing room because they get a reserved spot with like first questions. And then on the Gaza stuff, I had a conversation just today with someone who told me that they think that this is actually a play for him to broker some kind of deal between Israel and Saudi Arabia so he can win the Nobel Peace Prize, because Trump would really just like to have that on his resume.
And I'm pretty sure Jared Kushner would like to develop Gaza, right? I think that is in the realm of both like Trump's sort of like he just likes to say things because it pops into his head, but also there is, a lot of sort of geopolitical things at play here that he wants to use his pressure on Egypt and Jordan and Saudi Arabia. Plus, it would be a great business opportunity for the Trump brand. I mean, that sounds flip, but I don't think it's out of the realm of possibility. And then, was it today or yesterday when he just threw out a Saturday deadline on, blowing up the Gaza hostage
All hostages
deal?
need to be released by Saturday, or else all hell will break loose.
Yeah, it's upsetting.
It's exhausting, is what it is. And I think it's exhausting for everyone here, American public, journalists, analysts. It's just so much. And that is really actually the goal, is to just overwhelm us with information so that either we are just distracted and not paying attention to the things that really do matter, the stuff underneath the surface. I think it was, Brave New World, which was talking about how it's not 1984, this idea of like controlling us and that's like, we're all, little robots that are just following along like ants. It's more of that we are just flooded with information, overwhelmed by it, and we are given things that are just, candy to the eye. And so then that way we're just distracted from what's really going on, which could be more sinister.
Let's talk tariffs.
Real uplifting group tonight.
This is a fun topic.
We all need some Soma.
Tariffs. Donald Trump, this was not something that just fell off just fell out of his mouth during a presser. He's been talking up tariffs for a long, long time. He thinks they're the greatest thing in the world. He's actually, implemented them against China. What was the 10% tariffs? And then he announced the 25% on steel and aluminum. Thank you. And of course, Mexico and Canada have
Bought themselves 4 weeks.
Yeah. Melissa, where do you think tariffs stand on the spectrum of this is real Trump that we're going to get, and it's negotiating, it's what would we say in the Bay Area?
Posturing, yeah.
Yeah.
Look, Donald Trump sees that this is a lever he can pull, right? There is a power, right? What power does America have in the world? We have military power, of course, but we also have economic power. And so just being able to walk into the room and being like, tariff you, give me what I want, right? It is it's a way of using your power. Now, is it always successful? I'm not sure we got much out of Mexico or Canada in exchange for that. But I think he just sees it's this free thing I can threaten. I don't actually have to do it, right? The actual consequences of it, we don't really have to deal with just yet. It's this free thing I can go out and do, and this sort of stick I can bash people on the heads with and try to get them to do what I want. And in some ways, it's very understandable, right? This is aside from guns, right? This is our other international power. And going out there and threatening it to bend other people to his will is, not the most outlandish thing you ever heard of, right? He's pulling what he can pull. So, but will he follow through with them? Remember he was going to overhaul NAFTA, and then it was just like tweak. So he made some changes, which okay, but it wasn't like this huge I'm ripping it up. It wasn't like that. So we know he says things and they don't always pan out in the world. I think a lot of people hear this and just go, oh, well, then what do you actually really want? And then let's just have that conversation and not actually have the tariff conversation. I don't know that international leaders care. I can tell you, when you watch, like the financial news, like they didn't move.
I know, that's
which is why everyone's like, yeah, no one believes this because none of the business leaders are like, yeah, bro, like we remember the first time, like we're not necessarily acting like in response to this. And so when that happens, then no one's taking it seriously. And so it's really more just, are you actually going to go through with it? What would that even look like? I think people are sort of coming around to it. But as a leader, it is there on the table. He's using it.
Anything recent?
It's like the art of the deal, right? I mean, I think, if you look at like what Canada said they would do, it was policies they had already passed like 6 months ago, right? I mean, a lot of this is posturing. Again, like, I think this is where there is like some semblance of sort of, if you want to call it a check on Trump, is like he does care what the markets do. If what he is instituting is sending the stock market into free fall, I do think we will see some dialing back, because that is sort of a place and, part of, I would argue, like a lot of his sort of psychology is like being accepted and revered in these sort of circles that he grew up looking at and wanting to be part of. And so, it's very confusing. I was actually sick with the flu when that whole weekend happened, and I was just like getting these alerts, between my fever, being like, wait, we're tariffs on it? No, we're dialing it back.
That's real. What am I hallucinating?
But I mean, what's very telling in that is like, I think that the markets didn't move, that like both the president of Mexico and the prime minister of Canada seemed really just confused about what he wanted. And then, I think that this aluminum and steel thing clearly is something that he did institute the first time, so he probably does not think is going to be like as devastating as across the board tariffs would be. But yeah, I brought up eggs. I do think like a lot of the people that voted for Trump want to see prices come down, want to see their pocketbook affected by his presidency. And I think that those are the kind of like medium and longer term things to be watching, is like really nothing he's done in these first few weeks has anything to do with those pocketbook issues.
Yeah, I'm not an economist, so I will definitely keep my comments short on this. But I do think that the tariffs is a stress test, just to kind of see what he can get away with, how people will react. And with the news cycle the way it is, because everything is happening so quickly, one of Trump's, the thing that actually Trump is doing in my mind is he's delivering on the promises he made on the campaign trail. And so all of the people who voted for him, he can be like, I did tariffs. And whether or not he continues to stick with these numbers and percentages doesn't really matter, because it'll be on to the next thing. And if it never happens and we don't talk about it 3 months from now, it's fine, because everybody will be like, oh yeah, he did that tariffs thing when he took office. And I think that is really for him, a lot of what's happening over these first few weeks is very much saying, I'm delivering on my promises, which actually is where the Democrats do fall flat, because they have constantly tried to enact their agenda, but they do it in a much more methodical and, respecting the institutions and kind of like the flow of legislation and all these kind of things. And Trump can do it through executive orders, announce all this stuff, and his base will just remember that, oh yeah, he did the tariffs thing.
Okay, so let's turn our attention to state and local, but this also involves Donald Trump. And that is, so San Francisco stands to lose $3 billion.
That's what the lawsuit says?
Yep, from the federal government over its sanctuary city status.
This year.
Yeah, that's within 1 year. What do you see? How do you see that playing out? I mean, that's something that if it's done, we feel that right away, right? I mean, right away being within months, not.
To Maurice's point.
Okay.
And this issue of poking, without being very serious. It's interesting because y'all remember he did this the first time.
The exact same language.
Well, actually, the language this time is more vague, right? Last time he said, cut off the DOJ funding. This time it just says federal funding, which leads me to believe there's some trolling going on here because it's actually even. So, so the first time they said.
The lawyer shows up with her notes.
Sorry, I just want to make. I think it's important when
No,
you're
it's
talking
good,
about
it's
these. So he writes. I want to make sure they do not receive access to federal funds, right? That's what he wrote this time around. Before he wrote, it was a lot more specific. It wasn't like hugely specific, but this is just.
When Jeff Sessions was reining him in.
Right. Yeah.
Simpler times.
He says people who refuse to comply with 8 USC 1373 will not be eligible for federal grants except as necessary for law enforcement purposes. Like that's the first time. This time it's you will not receive access to federal funds. This is a Pam Bondi, version of this. And so it seems to be, again, some trolling. It's not clear to me that there would actually be a loss of federal funds. And by the way, he's directing the Attorney General and the Secretary of Homeland Security. So these are two specific agencies. They, probably do not have, access to cut off all federal funds. And so I'm doubtful that would necessarily be the case.
Okay.
Or that San Francisco could argue, as we did successfully the first time, that our sanctuary law actually allows for a little bit of cooperation, and also that we're not required to cooperate with federal, with ICE. And so it seems like it's more of this: I delivered on my promise. I went after the sanctuary cities. I threatened to take away federal funds. And then everybody here gets their hair on fire and, starts filing literally 70-page filings. Which I'm going to guess was started before Inauguration Day.
Yeah.
They probably said, on November 5th, they were like, let me start writing this petition because this is coming. And so they filed the TRO. It was just last week that they filed it. There has not been an order on the ruling, on that motion yet that was filed by San Francisco City Attorney and on behalf of New Haven, Connecticut, and also the County of Santa Clara, et cetera. But it did lay out that San Francisco totally stands to lose $3 billion. And that includes around $8 million from the DOJ. So, not
chump change.
Not chump change.
I think there's a few things here. One is that, so San Francisco proactively filed this suit in reaction to these DOJ memos and the executive order Melissa's talking about. They actually haven't sued California, or San Francisco, which is who litigated this the first time around and won in the circuit courts. They filed lawsuit against Illinois and Cook County and Chicago, which is also where they sort of initiated some of these original ICE actions, which I think kind of tells you something both about the fact, who they see as sort of politically vulnerable. And I think also that the fires maybe could be playing into this. I do think that there's been a little bit of caution on even the federal side around okay, there's this huge disaster playing out.
Well, also Chicago sanctuary law is actually
very wide,
is much tighter than ours. Yeah, is much less cooperative than San Francisco.
But the question is, does this go to the Supreme Court, which I think the Trump administration wants it to, and how will they, look at this case, because we haven't had a case law around sanctuary ordinances before the Supreme Court. But yeah, I think, to your point, the interesting thing is the way they message these sanctuary ordinances. It sounds like SFPD is standing in the way of ICE, which is not how this works, right? This is essentially just saying we are not going to use our own resources to help you do your job as federal immigration enforcement. And then on top of that, as you pointed out, Melissa, there's so many carve-outs in the state and local ordinance that do allow cooperation if somebody has been actually convicted of a crime, that I think it's going to be kind of interesting to see, does the Chicago one go further because they don't have those carve-outs, or does it even matter to the courts?
They don't have the carve-outs.
Yeah,
basically.
they just say
it's just we will not. It doesn't matter if they're a mass murderer. We will not cooperate with you.
Well, and
But
with
they're
those
not gonna go to
carve-outs,
prison anyway.
does San Francisco actually turn over?
Yeah.
Violent
We've turned
criminals?
over hundreds of people probably a year out of the city jail.
This is a big reason of why Chesa Boudin was recalled as district attorney, because he was charging drug dealers as accessory after the fact, which was not at all what they were doing, and allowing them to evade federal and immigration deportations because there was word that some of these individuals were victims of human trafficking themselves from Honduras. I think what we've seen so far, at least from the city side, is the sheriff's office has come out very strongly and said that, we're going to follow our sanctuary city policy. It doesn't mean they won't cooperate with ICE in any way, especially if you're a violent offender who is found guilty. But what's interesting about this is that Mayor Daniel Lurie has been very silent about sanctuary city policy.
Kind of like Gavin.
Kind of like Gavin. And the reason is probably because of the funding that they get from the federal government. And a supervisor in the mission, Jackie Fielder, just actually put a resolution forward reaffirming sanctuary city here in San Francisco, the policy. And Daniel Lurie did not sign it. The resolution went into, and it's a non-binding resolution.
Yeah.
He doesn't have to sign it, but
He could have.
you would think that a mayor of San Francisco normally would in normal times,
Right.
but he is not actually I don't think he's even really talked or used the words sanctuary city in going after it. And he has been more than happy to let City Attorney David Chu take the lead on this, which, it depends who you are. It could be
I think it
seen
makes
as
sense,
savvy.
actually.
It could be
Yeah.
seen as opening the door for a leadership vacuum. It could mean that someone like, say, City Attorney David Chu raises his profile to the point that he challenges Daniel Lurie in 4 years.
But this is where I actually think there's so much hand wringing about what are Democrats doing and why isn't Gavin standing up and why isn't and I think it actually makes sense. I think that Lurie and Newsom understand how much of how Trump sort of rules is about his ego, and why not let Rob Bonta, the Attorney General, and David Chu, the City Attorney, lead these things? They're doing it in a court of law. They're going through the processes that we have set out in our constitutions, and I think that I don't expect this to last forever, because I think especially for Lurie, and there's other things we can talk about in this, but whether or not he wants to pick a fight with Trump, the fight is coming for San Francisco, so they will not be able to avoid this forever. But I do think sort of not antagonizing Trump in this moment from both Newsom's perspective and Lurie's is probably not a bad bet, and I don't think that they're paying any political price for it, because I think the public kind of understands. If you're going to the White House hat in hand to ask for aid for the most destructive wildfires the state has ever seen, do you need to pick a fight over some of these other things that are being litigated, that are being pushed back against? I mean, did you guys see his statement on the birthright order? This is unconstitutional, period.
Yeah.
Gavin Newsom.
That was
it. He's never been so concise in his life.
The title of that press release was longer than the press release.
Yes.
Right, literally.
And you all know Gavin, he doesn't mince words.
Yeah, but I also would say that the reasons that I think there's total truth to what you just said. But the messaging that they're giving is that actually we don't want to be distracted from our priorities, which is not really,
bullshit.
that's being disingenuous.
Yeah, agreed.
Also, I think there are a lot of people who do not want to see city resources, maybe here, maybe Chicago and other places, engaged in fighting with the Trump administration over criminals who are in the country unlawfully and not documented. That seems like a not good place to put resources for a lot of people. And so it's not just necessarily I don't want to piss off Trump. It's that this is politically not a fight that they want to fight, and standing up and being I'm the guy who's gonna save the criminals. It's no, don't be that guy.
Yeah.
So I think that there is some political calculation here too. That's a pretty unpopular thing.
This is exactly why Democrats can't get their message out the same way Republicans can, because Republicans will say, you are protecting, criminals. And Democrats will be well, it's different if you're a violent criminal who killed someone or someone who got a speeding
But they
ticket.
don't even want to brag about what they have done. I mean, the state prison system has handed over some 6,000 undocumented immigrants in the last 6 years to federal immigration authorities because they had serious or violent offenses. Nobody in Sacramento is standing up and crowing about that. They don't want to, talk about the hundreds of people they've handed over from
Maybe
the
they
jails.
should.
Well, yeah,
Maybe they should say,
They're not
yes,
doing it because
this
they're
is
afraid that the left is
okay.
going to be mad at them.
Yeah,
The
because
left. The left didn't give them the White House, so anger them.
You guys could get a job in political messaging, huh?
No one would
Oh
hire
no,
me.
I'm just saying, like, it's not necessarily that it's. Maybe it's the message that needs to change, right?
Well,
Not
you see
like
this-
if you're sitting there and like just like either I'm going to be quiet and I'm not going to say, hey, yeah, we actually do cooperate, and you know it's a good thing that we do that. Sometimes here's the place where I think the line should be,
Yeah.
and we're not going to, we don't want to, we want people to be able to call the police if they need help, but if they, under certain circumstances, then yes, and I'm going to stand up and I'm going to be thrilled and I'm going to say yes, we turned over 200 people, but they don't do that, right? They don't do that. Instead, it's always over here. Way, way, way over here in a place that's indefensible, so indefensible that they can't even issue press releases about it.
But just the time it took to show that nuance was so much longer than just saying deport the criminals.
Like, yeah, the tweet.
Well,
Well, then
and
save
some
the
of them-
criminals
The tweet writes
is just
itself,
as
right?
short and useless.
Yeah, but some of them are doing that messaging. I mean, Illinois Governor J.B. Pritzker did come out and say, "Yeah, look, violent criminals, we'll help you. We'll get them out of here, but we are going to defend, blah blah blah." I think San Jose's mayor has taken.
Well,
a
he's been
similar-
trying not to talk about sanctuary, like sort of, let's not call it sanctuary, right? Again, we'll see if that works, but
Okay, well, we brought up Daniel Lurie. We have a new mayor here in San Francisco. Josh, what do you think of his start in office?
You go.
Tell you what I think of his life story. Daniel Lurie, I'm sure everyone knows, but essentially he is a nonprofit founder and
Look at you leading with that, as Max would want you to.
Max Zabo, his spokesperson, would kill me if I just said heir to the Levi Strauss fortune. He's had essentially one real job his whole life, and he came into office in a very strategic way. He ran a near flawless campaign on the messaging when it comes to not going too hot or not going too soft and kind of staying right in the middle. And it didn't hurt that he also spent $9 million of his own money, which that itself would have been a record for a mayor's race in San Francisco history, not even including the extra $7 million his mom and his brother and his other friends threw in. So did he buy the race? Kinda. Did he run a good messaging down the middle campaign that wins with ranked choice voting, which allows you to just order everyone and then redistribute all the votes? I think it's terrible. Ranked choice, it's un-American in my opinion. Just 1 versus 1. But the whole point is Lurie has been very coy about what his plans are. He says he's going to, end unsheltered homelessness in record time, build 1,500 shelter beds in the first 6 months. We've seen no plan now that he's been a month in office.
fentanyl emergency.
Yeah, he's got a emergency fentanyl measure that passed through the Board of Supervisors. The fact that he got that passed is really impressive. It shows that he's better at working with colleagues and stakeholders than London Breed was as mayor. Mayor Breed was just always going to war with just about everybody on every front. And if you weren't her enemy, you were feeling like an ATM giving her political cash. So this is what I was told. Sorry, I should clarify that. But I would say that, there's a lot of optimism that San Francisco can turn the corner. He's getting the benefit of the doubt from just about everybody because he is going to meet with people. He says he wants to listen. He hasn't, drawn any lines of the sand for the most part. And whether or not, you're going to address the crisis, I think, he made a lot of big promises, and there's been very little action to this point. One issue that we saw with Mayor Breed was that there was a lot of corruption at City Hall during her time in office, the so-called city family that was found to be doing a bribery scheme on permitting and construction in the city. And then there was just other people abusing contracts and not doing what they said they were going to do. So Daniel Lurie comes in and he's going to clean up City Hall. I think what's interesting is he has brought this coterie of people who have business expertise, for the most part, very little experience in city government. And with this fentanyl emergency measure, he's now going to be able to bypass the Board of Supervisors for most contracts with limited input. And the question is, who is he going to give these billions, millions and billions of dollars of contracts to? If you've never worked in government in your whole career experience is working with other nonprofits, you're probably just going to work with those same nonprofits. So there is a question of, will the checks and balances be there to actually get the results out of these organizations? Are you just trading a new brand of insiders for the other? I think Daniel Lurie's, again, brand new. You don't know what's going to happen. People wanted to give benefit of the doubt, but for someone who's never really had a job other than collecting money from your rich friends and family to give to other organizations, being mayor of San Francisco is a pretty tough task.
I agree. I'm just baffled by this argument that I'm going to return accountability to city government by making contracting less accountable.
Yeah.
I get it. There's some nuance there that we maybe have too many levels of bureaucracy and that it hasn't actually been working and that it's too hard to do things, but it is sort of just an interesting move as your first sort of out of the gate, this is how I'm going to bring trust back to government, is I'm going to be I can just hand out millions more dollars than the last person without anybody exercising oversight.
Well,
maybe it'll work.
And it sounds great. We have a police department that is supposedly around 500-600 officers short of fully staffed. He says, I'm going to fully staff the police department. Well, San Francisco also has $1 billion budget deficit it's going to be dealing with. It also is likely to be doing layoffs in the future.
Who knows what Trump's going to go after of our budget?
And then,
that could be bigger.
Then we got the Trump cuts. So, I think he's basically counting on his ability to do more with less in a town, the whole knife fight in a phone booth mantra about San Francisco politics. He's never actually been in that phone booth, and it gets pretty crowded and ugly and sharp elbows and such. And by the time his first budget is introduced in June, all of the goodwill will be out the door. And I think we're going to see San Francisco become pretty nasty again. And this goodwill that we're seeing right now, unless you get results within this next 6 months to a year, Daniel Lurie is going to be really wondering why he spent so much money for this job.
Melissa?
Y'all remember Willie Brown when he ran for mayor the first time? He said he was going to fix Muni within his 100 days. Yeah. And if you ask him about it, he says, I didn't say which 100.
Yeah. He's still working on it.
I just mean politicians making dumb promises and not living up to them is since we were in caves, hunting and gathering. So no, so I'm not surprised. Sure. Why not? And look, the truth is, no, he's not an insider, but that's exactly why he got elected. His biggest applause line is when he would stand on stage and they would attack him for not having experience, and he would go, "This kind of experience," these yahoos on stage, and the crowd would go crazy. I think that's people what. And look, if it doesn't work, and if that's then okay. But I think people knew that, and they wanted something different, and we're all still waiting to see kind of what that looks like. So again, I'm not surprised that he hasn't been able to fix downtown. And your paper, it wasn't you, but wrote a whole thing. It was 2 weeks in, and it was he still hasn't fixed downtown. And it was bro, fucking and again, it wasn't you, Josh.
It's exactly the same.
It was Alex, I think, over there, who was just, and I was bro.
And there's still no eggs.
It's been a few weeks. It took years to screw this up. Give him a minute.
I do think people, all of them who are, if you just got elected, get some grace. But
yeah, I think he's still in that right now.
Yeah.
Okay. Last topic before we get to the news quiz. How many of you are from Oakland? Okay, I see a few hands. Okay. You, of course, don't really have a mayor right now. You have an interim
That's not
mayor.
true. They have many mayors.
They have the Andy Warhol mayor. Every 15 minutes,
Yeah.
they get to have a new mayor. Okay, so previous mayor, arrested. Currently an interim mayor. Barbara Lee, Representative Barbara Lee, has announced her intention to seek the office. Just we'll run right down the stage here. Your thoughts, can she do it? Would she do it? Is there someone better? Is there any hopes that Oakland will get the mayor it deserves? Whoever it might be. I'm not.
That's a loaded
Big question.
I know.
The mayor,
In 30 seconds.
I mean,
Well, remember,
Someone who's really going to
Yeah.
deal with their problems.
Well, Barbara Lee, came up through the ranks of politics as someone who worked for Ron Dellums, who the former congressman who became the mayor of Oakland. I'm not sure that bodes well for her mayorship, but it's not surprising. I think she's very popular over there. Probably has a really good chance of winning if she runs. The problem is, of course, that the office of the mayor really relies on the force of personality, right? The mayor in Oakland doesn't have that much power. It's mostly city council that has the power. And so you have to have somebody who can really be big and go out there and try to use a bully pulpit and sort of force things in that way and move the public in a way to get their agenda through. Now, is Barbara Lee that politician? I am skeptical that she is. She's spent her life in Congress and doesn't really have huge legislative victories to show for it. She hasn't really demonstrated a desire to or necessarily the ability to so far, but we could all be pleasantly surprised. She loves the city, obviously, and has represented it for a long time. I think there's a lot of goodwill for her, but it's unfortunately structurally that office is really hard.
Yeah, I agree. I mean, I think she does have a lot of goodwill, and even with her progressive sort of national profile, like seems to have connections and credibility with different, groups that have historically been really on opposite sides of a lot of the politics there. I will say she gave us a better answer on political breakdown than I expected when I asked her about the fact that, she's been one of 435 for 20 something years. And that's a very different role than being an executive. And she talked about, some of the things that she had brokered as a member of Congress, including a big deal around the port. And it's too complicated, but anyway, she brought together, business and labor and environmentalists to strike some deals around the dredging. And, it was a more substantive answer than honestly what I expected. So, I mean, we all live in this region. I hope Lurie does great, and I hope if she wins, she does great too. But I do think it's a really hard thing. And I think that there are structural challenges with the way government is set up there that should be part of the conversation, I would argue, of this election. I'm also really interested to see how she frames this. Is she running just to be mayor forever? Or is she saying, let me be the sort of the bridge to the next person and let me kind of fix some of these things and use that credibility?
Okay, final word to you, Josh.
Oakland is deeply dysfunctional, similar to San Francisco.
It makes San Francisco look pretty good, actually, some
Yeah,
days.
I mean, that's just it, actually. I think Oakland is actually a tougher nut to crack in some ways. And with the issues around public safety, policing, with its district attorney, we've seen that go all over the place as well. Barbara Lee, sure. I mean,
That's the
Again,
slogan.
why does anybody want
Bumper
these
sticker.
jobs?
Barbara Lee,
Is
sure.
a better question.
But I mean, we've seen with Karen Bass in LA. I think it being a member of Congress is in no way preparation for running a city. I took a brief break in my journalism career to work in the state legislature in the assembly as a communications director. And I can tell you right now that seeing the way that one assembly member, which is one out of 120 state legislators, the demands of that job are nothing compared to even being a supervisor, let alone a mayor. So I don't envy that task for her having come at this point in her career to that role. But I also think that the departments are so broken in different ways that actually being the mayor of Oakland is probably one of the worst jobs in politics.
Thank you for answering, and thank you to our panel today, Josh Kane, Marisa Lagos, and Melissa Kane, and thanks to all of you here and everyone watching and listening online. Have a great rest of your week, and stay informed and involved. We'll see you again soon.